Good evening. I'm hereby calling to order the December 12th, 2022 meeting of the Committee of the Whole. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ballestrea.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good boy.
The purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss and provide an update of the Aquatic and Community Center. And I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Ward.
I'm just going to turn it over to these guys because that's who you want to hear from. I think you've all been getting my updates with the drone photos. So if you have any questions, you can shoot an email to me and I can get the answer if I don't have it. But let Jason and Gavin kind of get
This evening, we have Gavin Smith and Jason Nolde with us. Thank you.
I brought my basketball over, but I didn't see any hoops up yet.
Give us some time.
Oh, and Chris Trotta. Hi.
Oh.
Thank you.
Doesn't it go this way?
So real quick, I was going to give an update on a couple of, there's two resolutions on tonight's meeting relative to some of the soft costs, the kitchen equipment and the sporting equipment. So following that, we're going to have the majority of the soft costs then under contract. The majority of what's remaining relates to the building signage and also the IT equipment we're looking to finalize as well. But from like the kitchen equipment standpoint, that came in approximately $37,000 under what we had budgeted for that particular line item. And as it relates to the sporting equipment, the total FFE package is still tracking right now. Again, with the signage still being open, but $84,000 under our original estimate that we had for that. So, wanted a quick update on the funding purposes or the funding aspect, but then wanted to have Gavin update you on where we're at with construction and hopefully everybody, you see a lot of activity out there and it's starting to really take shape, which is nice to see.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jason, and good evening.
Hey, Gavin.
Hello.
Hi.
That handout that you guys have there, just to give you some perspective of where we're working and, kind of where we're going. So we can start with the building. We started in that center portion B, which is the yellow area. And if you've driven by, you can see the gymnasium up. Okay, so those walls are up. Starting yet this week, middle to end of this week, we'll actually start getting the roof structural steel on the gymnasium. So we'll be putting up the trusses and the roof deck, and then the roofing will follow to include actually pouring that concrete slab in that area. Other masonry going, if you look at that yellow center B part going left towards A, recently, starting last week and this week, you can see some of those walls going up on the south exterior of the building. Working down towards that southwest corner is where all the mechanical is. So what that allow us to do is very similar to the gym, getting the masonry walls up, getting the roof deck on so that, again, we can do the roofing and start on the interiors in that area. Following that A area, we'll jump back to the north part of B, that yellow area, and then kind of work our way north through C on the end of the main building, and then that isolated green box towards the top is the pool building where the concessions and the locker rooms and everything, and we'll actually do that last because it's primarily masonry and steel decking and then some minor finishes on the inside. Just to be honest, overall, from a building standpoint, we're a few weeks behind. That's a result of some weather, some coordination challenges that we had up front, getting some materials, things of that nature. But we're resequencing a few things and optimistic that that's going to get us back on track from a building standpoint. As far as the pools go, we got pool A, B, and C. I'll start talking about B because it's actually furthest along. So that B is where they've got the deep, the diving area and some of the deeper lap stuff, and that's actually why we started there. It has to do with the excavation. So all the underground plumbing is in, and the floor of the pool is actually poured from a concrete standpoint. All of the walls have the rebar associated with it, and what they're doing is they're going around and they've started the walls towards the end of last week in that B area, so that's all good. Simultaneously, we're working in A. Just recently, we got Ohio Department of Health inspection for our underground, so we'll be pouring that here and starting the walls in pool A. And then last will be C. That's actually the slide tower that'll start, late winter going into spring. We do have all the asphalt in from a site standpoint. If you look kind of the north, that darker gray area with the parking stalls in it, all that base asphalt's in, and then some around on the south side of the building where A and B is, a lot of that asphalt's in, and that'll allow us to move forward with the construction and try to keep as clean as we possibly can. So yeah, you can see that's east looking west. So from B, kind of looking towards pool B and A, you can see the parking lots established from an asphalt standpoint. And again, that's helpful in just managing construction. You can see that gymnasium area, again, the east side, if you were looking from the maintenance area, west, and then far back behind the gym, you can see the pools being built. So the excavation's done for those, but we're putting the concrete in now. So yeah, towards the bottom of that, you can see pool A, and this happens to be, you can see the piping in there. There's quite a bit of piping in the excavation, and they'll be pouring that here pretty soon with recent inspections. And then, yeah, this is actually the pool B area, and actually you can see the crane towards the top where they're pouring the concrete. So all that's poured at this point, and they've actually poured a couple of the walls kind of on that west side. So these are really good pictures to get a good perspective on what's going on and where we're working. Yeah, you can, yeah. So kind of top left, you can see portions of the building foundations. That's that area C. And we've got the electricians and the plumbers working in there. So they'll be able to stone that soon. We'll get the masons in from a sequence standpoint. So yeah, it's
Wow.
pretty much it. Lot going on. That'll continue through winter, obviously into spring and the big push. So.
I see they've been working on Saturdays too.
Yeah, I don't, over the past couple months, I don't think there's a Saturday we haven't worked on, and we're trying to, again, make up some of that time that we talked about, and then taking advantage of nice weather when we've got it on Saturdays, working the trades, again, to keep pushing this thing. So,
Great.
yeah, everyone's cooperating nicely, so.
Kevin, are we still looking at the same completion date?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, the pools are in pretty good shape as far as that goes. The building's pushed out a couple of weeks, but we're optimistic that we can make that up with our resequencing and working the Saturdays and everything too. So, and we kind of had a staggered finish on the buildings and the pools anyway, so we're maintaining that right now.
Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you. Gavin, what are the inside, how are the inside walls of this gymnasium going to be finished?
Yeah, so it's painted block, very similar to maybe a high school gym that you might see or something to that effect, and then it'll have, do we have acoustical panels in there, Chris? Yeah, so we'll have some acoustical features in there to deaden the sound, and then obviously it'll have all the gym features in the basketball backstops and all the other, accessories that'll come with the gym, so. And then a rubber floor instead of a traditional kind of wood floor.
But it looks like wood, doesn't it? Does look like
It
wood?
does, yeah. It's got a kind of a grain, a lighter wood color grain to it, yes.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Balestra?
so again, that floor then would still be able to be used for parties or wedding
Oh, yeah.
or something
It's very
like that, right?
accommodating to a community center because it's really multi-purpose. so
Okay, it is a
absolutely.
multi-purpose floor then and not
Yep.
a wood or,
Yep.
we're
Yeah,
gonna
and you
worry
won't-
about it being scratched or dug into or,
No, I mean, it might get a few little scars, but they're minimal and you can't really see them with that type of floor.
Right.
It's hardy. I think it holds up a little bit better for what you're gonna be using it for as opposed to wood. And then you don't have to worry about refinishing it either, so.
Yeah.
thank you.
It's still got a little cush to it, so it's safe to play on.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I had one more,
Oh,
maybe
Mr.
for
Mr.
Jason.
Monaco had something.
Okay,
His hand
I'm
up.
sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Monaco?
I know, on our ordinance this evening for the sporting goods, do you know, in that quote was the equipment for the seniors in that as well? I didn't notice it, but I didn't know if it's supposed to specify. I don't know if Jason can answer that, or
that-
you, Sean?
That's not part of the. part
The
of
senior
that
athletic
particular quote.
equipment, do we have any, is that gonna be something separate?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to have to answer that question later.
Mr. Monaco?
Thank you. My question is completion date the same for the pool, rec room, and community center, or are we opening those facility up to the public in phases? And if we are in phases, my question is, why aren't we working on the community center first? Because in my opinion, we could use that before we could use the rec center.
So we are working on both of them simultaneously. It just takes us a little bit longer to build that building, so that's why they've got that staggered finishes. So the discussion's been from kind of when we started, just to maximize the opportunity for the pool during the summer best we can, while the weather's decent, doing those staggered finishes on those to allow the pool to open, and then shortly thereafter, the building. So that is our goal, is to get the pool open first and
Okay,
then
pool
follow up with the
first.
building. Yep.
The community center second,
Yes.
and the rec center last.
By the rec center, you mean the gym, sir?
Gym, right.
Yeah, well, so when I say building, it's the gym and the building itself. Yeah, as one. So really, I'm talking about just two components, the pool and the building slash gym.
Thank you.
So,
Mrs. Tressi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gavin, what about the, behind the Sunnydale residence?
Okay.
Doesn't look like it's a very wide area. When are you going to put the fence in?
Yeah, so
Mounding?
there's been a lot of challenges on that side, primarily with the fence and how it correlates with the trees that we're trying to save over there. So there's been a lot of accommodations. We haven't gone in and put the utilities in because we got to get the trees and everything out. So that'll most likely go in late winter, going into spring.
And will they still get the fence and the mounding?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have topsoil that we've stockpiled on site or across the street to accommodate those mounds.
Yeah.
I just have a question about near the service center.
Okay?
I see those posts.
Yep.
What kind of, is it fencing? I couldn't remember from.
Yeah, so there's a vinyl fence that'll go, it's a kind of a slatted system that'll go in those posts.
Okay.
Yep.
And then were the trees, were you still talking about the trees in front of that later on?
I don't recall. Yep, yes.
I could, yeah, I thought
Yes.
that's what I pictured it.
Yeah, and they'll most likely do all the plantings at one time,
Right,
probably next fall, to be honest, is the best time to plant, so.
okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments from anybody? All right. Thank you so much for giving us this update. It's really exciting. Mr. Ward, do you have anything else?
As Jason mentions, we have the kitchen equipment on the agenda for tonight and also the gym equipment. So if there are any questions pertaining to either of those, we'd be happy to answer anything.
Did you want to ask any member of council want to ask any questions right now, since we have a little time? About the kitchen equipment? The only thing I had was, the kitchen equipment is including the concession stand, because as I was going through everything, I saw like popcorn machine and different things.
Yes,
So it's all
correct.
in one?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Tressi?
And all of the cost is included, all of these bids for the equipment is all included in the 35 million?
Yes, yes. So this is part of FF&E. Jason mentioned that we're come in, was it 30,000 below budget for the kitchen equipment from what was budgeted, and the gym equipment, actually the total FF&E, we're still, was it 84,000 below the budgeted estimate.
And it's going to be installed by, the athletic equipment's going to be installed by prevailing wage labor. Is all that included also, the wages, taxes? And how about HVAC and lighting?
No taxes.
No taxes. That's a first. HVAC, lighting,
That's already part of our contract.
that's part of it.
Okay.
I just was reading and I thought it said electrical wiring was not included and volleyball install not included.
So that's the controller that raises and lowers the hoops. So it just has to be, the electrician will hook that up.
Yeah, as part of the vendor's quote, they would not be installing the electrical, but Higley and their electrical contractor has that as part of their contract, so that was the clarification. Oops, the clarification that they were making.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Sabetta. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. This meeting is now adjourned. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the December 12th council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestria.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is the approval of the minutes of the council meeting November 28th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta. Second by Mr. Balestria. Are there any suggested changes or amendments or deletions to these minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? These minutes have been approved as written. Next, does any council member have any correspondence or announcements this evening? Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a quick question, and it's about that animal control contract. We had a resident that mentioned that you get one service per year, and if you call a second time, it's $300. I didn't see that on the contract when we approved it. And I'm just wondering if that is correct or not.
I'm sorry.
I can't say that that's correct, but we're having a meeting on Wednesday with the company to clarify the scope of the work. And, there have been complaints about you get charged a second time, and that, as you said, is not in there. And that wasn't the intent. So we're going to sit down with them and hash things out.
Okay, great, because I know Mr. Balestray and I were both listening to the resident who said that he unfortunately had to call 3 times for 3 different critters, and that each event, when they come out past the first one, is $300. So it just seemed outrageous, and I don't think I've ever seen that in the contract, so.
It's not, and the one consideration or one of the considerations is the property owner doing something to attract the animals, like putting a deer lick out. You're going to get every animal in town showing up there. So, that's something that's got to be considered
Okay,
with regard to the whole thing.
thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements from council? Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you. The Chagrin River Watershed Partnership had their annual meeting on December 8th. It was via Zoom. The minutes can be viewed on their website. In 2023, they are planning to meet in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Is there anything further this evening? Next, we'll start with reports of officers, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have a couple things this evening. We had a very successful Fill the Cruiser on December 3rd at Eastgate. I want to thank you to all of our generous residents who donated to those who are less fortunate, and a big thank you to the police department. Thanks, Chief, to you and your guys. It was miserable, but you guys stuck it out, and we appreciate all you guys do for the residents. And we are currently looking for a part-time dispatcher in the police department. You can find more information about the position on the city's website. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for the mayor? Director of Law, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report this evening, nothing to state, but I do notice that all the department heads are all kind of spread out through council chambers. I was wondering if there's a reason, or you just want to, stay separate. Just kidding.
Thank you. Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. I have no formal report this evening.
Thank you. We will now move to next the reports of committees, commissions, and boards, beginning with the Building Committee. Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Mayor Chair. Tonight on the agenda, we have ordinance 22-30 and 22-31 that pertains to the permit fee schedule. We will discuss this fee when we get to that portion on the agenda.
Thank you. Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Legislative Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. Legislation Committee met on December 5th. As a result, there are 2 items on the agenda we can address when they come forth. There was a lengthy discussion on residential solar panels and light intrusion. The meeting minutes are being prepared. I want to thank the fire chief and the police chief and the city building director for all of their input. I will have a full report at the next council meeting once council has a chance to look over the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Public Works and Service, Mr. Balestreo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Public Works did have a meeting on November the 30th to discuss the MCI P grant from the Northeastern Ohio Sewer District. This will be applied to the Marnell Sewer Testing Program, affecting about 50 homes. The grant is for approximately $37,000. The project cost will be about $180,000. Before you tonight is Resolution 2022-96 for your approval from the Public Works and Services Committee's recommendation to continue this project in 2023. Also, we discussed the 2022 road program. An update was given, and I scheduled another meeting of the Public Works and Services Committee for Wednesday, December the 21st at 5 p.m. To discuss the 2023 road and sidewalk program. About $6.5 million has been allocated for the roads program for 2023. And just so you know, that resolution on the agenda tonight for the grant is an emergency resolution, as it has to be approved by the end of this calendar year if we wanted the grant.
Perfect, thank you.
That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Balestreo.
Madam President.
Mr. DeJohn.
Mr. Ballester, I see that Mrs. Teresi was left off of this legislation. She is sponsoring this too, I'm assuming?
Yes, it's recommendation from both.
So, Madam President, can we add Mrs. Teresi's name to that legislation when it comes up tonight?
Yes.
Thank you.
It was a recommendation from the committee from both. So, yes.
Okay. Recreation and Parks, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This past Friday night, Park and Recreation hosted an evening with Santa and his elves. The event included a visit with Santa, hot chocolate bar, 2 crafts, and a ride on the Christmas train. Everyone in attendance enjoyed the event. Special thanks to Chief Elliott and the fire department for hosting us in the fire base. Originally, it was planned to be held on the tennis courts, weather permitting, and the weather wouldn't have been good for what we wanted to do. So many thanks to the chief. The outdoor holiday lighting scavenger hunt is well underway, and completed answers are due by 4 p.m. December 15th. For more information and to get an answer sheet, please visit the website and watch the scroll for the pictures and the link. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Any questions for Mr. Mano? Safety and Transportation, Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Board of Zoning, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Board of Zoning will meet tomorrow here in Council Chamber at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Planning Commission, Mr. Balestreo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Planning Commission did not meet last week as we had no agenda, so I have no report.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the public portion of the meeting. Pursuant to City Code, Each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes allotted for the entire public portion. If you are here tonight in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. However, please note that this is not an opportunity for debate or slighted comments. If you would like to be heard this evening and not have done so already, please fill out a form located on the table at the public entrance of council chambers. I will call each person wishing to speak to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. Speak clearly into the microphone. It is now 7:15, and I will open up the public portion. Ms. Talbin?
Good evening. I'm Kathy Tobin, and I live at 6470 Gates Mills Boulevard. I'm here to talk about 3 items: light trespassing, solar panels, and naming rights on buildings in the city. I watched the November 28th City Council meeting. Since I was in Columbus lobbying, I couldn't be here. And I learned that there had been still no resolution on light trespassing and solar panels. And light trespassing, as you know, has been discussed since May 9th meeting, 7 months ago. There was also a recent article in the Plain Dealer on September 25th on light pollution in general. And it actually stated that artificial light blocks the production of melatonin, a hormone that regulates sleep cycles, and disrupted sleep cycles has been linked to an array of health problems. City Council passes resolutions and ordinances that focus on health and safety of its residents. So this is actually a health issue as well as a nuisance issue. It also pointed out that the reason it's an issue and it's getting worse is that people don't even aware that it's actually a problem and it's getting worse. So what I'd like to do, and I know that you've done work recently, and so that's great, but it's taken seven months. But I'd like the city to consider an education, to really educate the residents about this, because if you don't know it's an issue, you're not sensitive to it. I know that the fire department has a program for smoke detectors, so maybe there's a program that could be around education around the appropriate kind of light or even deflectors. But what concerns me the most is that it's taken 7 months, and it's been on the agenda. And the same goes for the solar panel. And then City Council has a standard operating procedure to pass emergency legislation to meet grant deadlines and other people's timelines so it goes to effect immediately. But there doesn't seem to be any emergency or fast-track process to move ordinances that affect residents. The other thing that I find troubling is, or I should say, not troubling, but I would recommend that when you actually table something, that you should put a date on that motion when you table it, so it automatically comes back to council at a specific time. I know that that's your practice to not put a date on it, and I know it lives at the bottom of the agenda, but it doesn't force the committee or whoever it goes to actually have a date that they come back to. Even if they don't have an answer, they can at least give a status, and residents know it's being worked on. So I'd really like to make that recommendation. I teach parliamentary procedures, and I make sure that they know they should always have a date, because if they don't, it's the best way to kill it. The other thing I found interesting, I guess, or troubling, is that we're wanting to attract young members, younger families here, but yet we're not addressing things that are happening, like people wanting to have solar panels. And so I just want to highlight that we're taking a long time to actually take a look at some of these things. And I don't know if you're looking at the possibility of electronic charging stations in the city, but if you're not, I think it's a good idea to start looking at it. Because since we're such a shopping mecca, and we have an exit to the freeway, people can stop here, eat, charge their vehicles, and keep going. So I don't know if you're looking at that, but that's also starting to happen all over the place. And number 3, naming rights of buildings selling the naming rights. I read in the Sun Messenger that the mayor's looking to raise funds to offset the investment being made in the Aquatic Center, Community Center. I was a member of a national organization who spent way too much money renovating one of their national headquarters in Washington, D.C. But they were very successful in raising money by selling memorial bricks, which you're looking at, but also selling the windows, memorials on windows and other sorts of things. They even sold the bricks when they originally built the building. And I feel that having residents invest in their city to be able to honor family members, teachers, or other important people in their life is a wonderful idea. It helps build connection to the community. But I caution you about selling naming rights to buildings. I remember when Progressive bought the naming rights to the baseball stadium, which had previously been named Jacobs Field, but lovingly called the Jake. I still refer to it as the Jake. At the same time that Progressives were paying for the right out of its marketing budget, it was also laying off employees, which wasn't lost on me or other people, and it added to negative publicity. I also remember the gun being changed to Quicken Loans Arena, and now it's called Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. It's really hard to keep track when people sell naming rights on buildings. And so you really have to think about having criteria
Mrs.
and
Talbot?
process.
You're almost at 6 minutes.
Oh,
So
sorry.
No, it's okay. I just I'll have a motion for you to continue.
Okay,
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, second by Mr. Mano.
okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I just recommend that you have criteria, establish some criteria and a transparent process if you're going to do any kind of naming, just so people understand and you have a standard way of managing it. When we have buildings that have names that are after people in the community, like the DeJohn Community Center 45 years ago, the Graga Pool 61 years ago, there's a connection to the community and its history. They honor the service and the commitment to the community, and their character and contributions set an example to model and celebrate. My own uncle, Edward Kovacic, had one of the original bathhouses in the St. Clair Superior neighborhood in Cleveland named after him. And for those of you who don't know, bathhouses were needed before indoor plumbing. That's how old it is. The bathhouse was turned into a recreation center, and my uncle was the first recreation director. He served in the Cleveland City Council and as a lobbyist in Cleveland transit system, and he was responsible for getting the funds to make it RTA. He had a people first mantra. He helped everyone in his community. And the building, which became, actually was named in his honor, and it was very important to the people in the community and to his family. This building became a historical landmark, and it held his name for 42 years. But in 2020, we learned that there was a resolution in Cleveland City Council to change its name. Then the city had gotten a grant to refurbish this 100-year-old building, and they couldn't tear it down because it was a Cleveland landmark. However, the city council person thought it would be good to change the name of the building. And he wanted to change it to something, to someone who had not done anything for the neighborhood or the community or even the city. Of course, he didn't know the history of the building or the man that it was named after. But he learned its history when he and all the city council members started receiving letters from longtime residents. There was even an online petition that held thousands of names from those who no longer live there, but were furious of the possibility of this change. Needless to say, the city council voted against the resolution, and it still has his name on it, and it's now a state-of-the-art building. So the lesson of this story is, don't change the name of the building or the structures that carry the name of people who make this city what it is. They are remembered and loved by residents and serve as a great example to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for your input and your ideas, and we will take them into consideration. And also, I just wanted to tell you that we do have an electric charging station at Eastgate Shopping Center. So that came before us this year, okay? Thank you. Mrs. Deborah Kramer.
My name is Deborah Kramer. I live at 1110 Belrose Road, and I'm here again about the solar panels. I thank you for having your lengthy discussion about the panels. I am looking forward to those minutes. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate your support because I've been coming out here for many, many months, and it would be nice to not. But, you know, now I feel like much more a part of the city. I love your idea of bricks or windows because I would purchase one for my father. I think that's a great idea. Back to the solar panels, just another thing for consideration. I try to think of something new each time I come. My house was built in 1950, and I know that some of the criteria for not allowing solar panels that are visible from the street has to do with maintaining the architectural integrity of the house. So I started thinking about what is different of my house now from when it was built in 1950. And I thought about skylights. There were no skylights on homes in 1950. And if you drive it up and down the streets of Mayfield Heights, they're all over the place and visible from the street. And then I thought about antennas, rooftop antennas that weren't on the house in 1950 when my house was built, and that was not an issue in terms of maintaining the architectural integrity of the house because it was deemed necessary, I would say. Along comes those, I don't even know what they're called, those big dishes that are up on the roof. Some of them are large, some of them are small, some of them are satellite dishes, but some of them are, you know, they come with your cable company. I've never had one of those because I still have a rooftop antenna. It's a newer one. It's not monstrous, but it's up there on my roof. And I've never had any objection to that. And quite frankly, I think my solar panels are not as ugly as my rooftop antenna. And my rooftop antenna is not as ugly as my neighbor's rooftop antenna, which is huge. And I just drove down my street today, and there were about 8 or 10 of those dishes up there, which I think are uglier than my solar panel. And one house even had their dish adjacent to their 2 skylights that I could see plain as day driving down the street. So it feels so much more arbitrary that this big issue, like somehow solar panels are going to be such a huge issue. They are no uglier than all these other things that have been added to the roof that don't maintain the architectural integrity from the 1950s when my house was built. So I hope those kinds of things are taken into consideration. We decided that those other things are necessary, and therefore we will allow it. And I think solar panels are necessary, as are charging stations. I don't think anybody thinks that charging station in Eastgate Shopping Center is, oh my gosh, so ugly, doesn't maintain the architectural integrity of the plaza. It's necessary. You drive down Mayfield Road and you see telephone wires everywhere. And we don't even think about them. We don't notice. And they're ugly. They're very ugly. Drive home and look at those wires. Well, maybe in the daylight. And they're ugly, but they're necessary. And I hope that these solar panels will be viewed in the same way because it just seems like much ado about nothing to not allow something that's necessary. So I sit here each week and I listen to the approval of the Board of Zoning Appeals minutes. I hear you have to have a debate and a discussion and approve or disapprove of what your board has decided. And once again, I wonder why there's never any discussion and the Architectural Board of Review has sole power over this very serious issue. So that's what I have to say for tonight. Thank you, and I will look forward to your minutes.
Thank you. Right, and Mr. Chad Lichten? Chad, just state your name and address. That's okay. Thank you.
You weren't here last week, and I brought in all these visuals because I want you guys to see kind of what I see, but this isn't enough because what I see will damage your eyes. Looking at a poster won't damage your eyes. This is just a snap from my cell phone, not a particularly technical picture, but you get the idea. The point source of the post light, little post light, just a visible bulb, just overflows the area even beyond the window shade. This will cause retinal damage, and it's meant to. My neighbor doesn't like me, and he has been intensifying what in 2016 was that, right? And now it's that bright, and it's I mean, it's beyond words bright. You cannot look at this. You cannot live well in our house at night unless if you cover up the front window completely with 2 bed sheets and a bunch of drywall. And this picture here is our living room at night, but there's 2 things you should know, and that's all this light leakage, all of it down the hallway is completely from this light. This is nighttime. This is not daytime. And this light is opening just half of our front window, just half. So there should be double the light leakage. I think because bullies now are using these LED lights that they say, oh, they're for our security, but they don't even live in these houses they own. We live here. We've been a long-time resident. We live here. And they bully people with this, and it just shouldn't be allowed. I mean, I think every resident should be able to comfortably look out their window all night long. I don't think there should even be like, oh, we'll take it down halfway. Like here, if you notice, Mayor, please, Mayor, if you notice our neighbor's window, I know it's not the best picture, but the blur will actually show you in his window he has a laser light show. A laser light show because he knows that if an ordinance gets passed about really intense lights, he can still bother the hell out of us with some stupid laser light show in his window. So this should be addressed in a very scientific matter about light and the candela of light and all right, get to some other things. This autism awareness police cruiser. See, I have autism, and all I want is to look out of my window at night. And this police cruiser has colorful puzzle pieces on it, which don't really help me. I would just like to look out of my window at night. So I don't know what that's for, but maybe you can help me if you do, in fact, care about autistic issues. This was an article just about the light ordinance that might be, and the mayor is quoted saying, a lighting trespass ordinance would be difficult to enforce in a community where homes are located close to each other. See, that doesn't exactly make sense because homes, yes, they are located close to each other, and that's exactly why there ought to be a lighting ordinance because we don't live well in our home. Like, we don't live well. We have to every night cover up every square inch of that window, and I can't enjoy my front yard at night. It's hard to even back out of the driveway without being blinded because this point source reflects off everything. And if you look directly at it, it is horrible. Literally for a moment, it is, look at this. You don't have to be a photography expert to understand that how intense a source must be to blow out a sensor just at that exposure level. I did my measuring, and the light in our kitchen, which is at night there's a clock on our oven, and that clock is so dim, but I can see in the dark, near darkness. I can walk through the kitchen without bumping into things. This is 2.6 trillion times brighter than the ambient light in my home. 2.6 trillion. Thank you for pointing out the lighting issue, by the way. 2.6 trillion times brighter. And I'm a photographer and I know how to measure light, and I've said many times that if you need help making the ordinance, I can be of assistance at making sure nobody gets bullied in their own home. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
You're welcome.
Legislation Committee, you did go over this at the meeting. I know you'll wait until the minutes are done, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Okay. This time I will close the public portion. It is 7:35. We will begin with resolution number 2022-95. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2022-95, a resolution reversing the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in recommending a variance be granted to Francesca Davidson, 6723 Larchmont Drive, to place a 6-foot-high privacy fence and gate 4 feet from the front of the house, Cuyahoga County permanent parcel number 862-38-052. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria. No. Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi. Yes. Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Moved by Mr. Monaco, second by Mr. Mano. This resolution disagrees with the granting of the variance by the BZA and is required by law to render this disagreement within 60 days. If you vote yes this evening, you are agreeing that the council should reverse the decision of the BZA, denying the variance. If you vote no, you are agreeing with the BZA's approval. Does any council member have any questions or comments? Mr. DeJohn.
It says a variance be granted to, so it's authorizing it. So you said if we vote yes for this, we are giving them permission to,
Mr. Murphy.
Where are you referring?
in the resolution itself. In recommending a variance be granted to,
Reversing.
It says reversing the action of the board in recommending a variance.
I'm sorry.
The very
I see that
beginning,
in
it
the-
says reverse.
Got it. What this does is the Board of Zoning Appeals recommended the variance be granted, and council apparently is disagreeing with that. So this would be the legislation that would state the intention of council to deny the variance. That's in there somewhere. Variance is denied.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
No.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Moving to resolution number 2022-96, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-96, a resolution authorizing a member community infrastructure grant program agreement by and between the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District and the City of Mayfield Heights to partially fund the Marnell Sewer Improvements Project and declaring an emergency. First reading.
And this resolution will be added with Mrs. Tressie's name on this as introduction. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
A motion to approve.
Moved.
Moved by Mrs. Tressi, second by Mr. Belstrea. This resolution authorized the regional water and sewer providers to enter in a grant program. The district established the Member Community Infrastructure Program that will provide funding opportunities to those communities within their district to address water quality and quantity issues associated with water and sewer infrastructures. The MCIP submitted an application to assist in funding the Marnell Sewer Improvement Project. All members should have received a copy of the grant and program agreement. The project and cost of this funding are explained under Article 3 of the proposal. And I believe Mr. Balestra touched on this evening. Do you have anything further you want to add to it?
Not unless council has any questions.
Anybody else? Questions or comments? Great. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestra.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This motion has been approved.
Mrs. Snyder?
Oh.
I just want to add for the record during the Public Works meeting that GPD Group will reach out to those residents that had volunteered to have their houses checked.
Okay.
So that's the ongoing part of the program. So they will take care of that, GPD
And
will,
do you know when this will start?
in the spring,
In the
as
spring.
far as I know,
I
right?
mean,
Right, Josh? As soon as the weather breaks.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right, resolution number 2022-97, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-97, a resolution authorizing the mayor to purchase a Ford F-350 dump truck for use by the Mayfield Heights Service Department and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestra.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestra, second by Mrs. Sabetta. All members of council should have received the memo that was forwarded to us from Valley Ford dealership showing the breakdown of the 2023 Ford F-350 chassis. Resolution 2022-30 was authorized and approved by council in April, authorizing the mayor to purchase this dump truck for $76,000. But due to supply chain issues, the purchase of the dump truck never happened. This dump truck needs to be rebid for 2023, and the total cost of the Ford 350 dump truck from the Valley Ford dealership will not exceed $99,385. This is part of the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program contract. And thank you, Mr. Brunello, for your information. Do you have anything further you'd like to add? Right. Thank you. Mrs. Tressi.
Mr. Brunello, when do you expect the truck to arrive? In 2023 or 2024?
Hopefully, they said if ordered on time, the truck should be here 2023, for sure, so. Well, I shouldn't say for sure. 2023.
Nothing is for sure.
Near the fall of 2023.
Wow. Mr. DeJohn.
So they canceled the last order. Is there a possibility that they could cancel this order again?
There is always that possibility, unfortunately, now, but they seem to have a grip on the production of these trucks now, so at least that's what they tell me. So we're hoping that that doesn't continue to happen. So
Did you look at any other companies for supplying dump truck?
we did not, only because this truck was ordered early on of this year, so
Right.
we got confirmation from Valley Ford that they opened up the gates again for 2023. Not sure, I mean, the canceling, it's been happening across the board for a lot of more, not just Fords, but there's some other, Chevys canceled a couple as well. It's just the luck of the draw, the truck you need and the truck you want.
Okay.
And,
Mr. DeJohn.
and for the record, how much of an increase is this from the last order? Do you know that?
It's roughly 30,000.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions from council? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestra.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been adopted. Now we will move to resolution number 2022-98. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2022-98, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a direct contract without competitive bidding with Montgomery Technology Systems, LLC, to replace the city's jail control system as part of the new communications center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Tressi,
Second.
second by Mr. DeJong. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. DeJong.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Balestrea. We received a memorandum from Chief Mealy detailing the quote to replace our existing jail control system so we can integrate it with our new communication center. This equipment controls all doors and lights within the jail. The cost of this equipment is $69,600, which includes the installation of the equipment. The current system is more than 30 years old and will not work with the new communication technology that we will be getting in the communication center. Chief Mealy is here with us this evening, if any council member has any further questions. Okay, seeing none, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJong.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution number 2022-98 has been approved. We will move to ordinances, beginning with ordinance number 2022-29. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance 2022-29, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Materion pertaining to the Job Retention Grant Program and declaring an emergency. It says second reading, but it's third reading. And I still don't have the contract that is attached here too and made a part hereof, so I would request that there be a motion to table this evening.
Do I have a motion to table this ordinance? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. DeJong. Roll call to table.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJong.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. So we placed ordinance number 2022-29 on the table. Mr. Murphy, ordinance 2022-30.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-30, an ordinance amending various sections of Chapter 1335 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Permits and Fees by revising the fee schedules contained therein and declaring an emergency. Second reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. DeJong.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mr. Monaco. These changes are seen within the ordinance. All members should have received a copy. The old fees are slashed out, and the new ones are seen next to the current fee schedule. In red writing on your current ordinance, you will see the new fee printed. Mr. Monaco has done a lot of work with this permit, with his committee member.
Actually, the building commissioner did a lot of work.
Well,
I
and-
really
yes,
appreciate all
and
that.
Mr. Thomas.
But my recommendation tonight is not to approve those fee schedule as submitted. Most of the fees are based on valuation of construction cost. I believe that we should base the fees on square footage, which is a measure taken right from the drawing. By valuation, you rely on a number given to you by the permit applicant, and it may be grossly underestimated. I give you a typical example. You have two bathrooms, same size. They have the same work done. One contractor comes to obtain a permit. He's going to say that the work is $15,000. Another contractor is come in doing the same work next door. His fee is $10,000. So you have two different fees for exactly the same kind of work. I strongly recommend that we amend the fee schedule to read by square footage instead of valuation.
I'll second that.
So, yeah,
Table. Can't we make can't we,
Mike's making a motion to table.
Oh.
And send it back to committee? Did you make a recommendation to come to council with these fees?
I have talked to the building commissioner, and I told them that I did not agree to that, to the valuation, and I would leave it up to the rest of council to make that determination, whether they want it through valuation or through square footage.
can we,
So I'm going to send this back to committee. Oh, Mr. Thomas.
So, of course, I'll respect whatever decision council makes. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the fees that were established were based on the landscape of Mayfield Heights. You've got Mayfield Road, which has a lot of small square footage, high valuation projects. You've got Sheets, you've got Raising Cane's, you've got Krispy Kreme. These are all smaller buildings with high dollar valuations. If you're talking about an operation like Krispy Kreme, $1.3 million project, an $800 permit fee, that doesn't really cover what we needed to cover. With a 1% valuation, that brings that permit fee up to $13,000. That gets you in the ballpark of where I think we need to be in regards to our permit fees. This was not just something I came up with. This was a review of over 17 surrounding municipalities. Multiple other jurisdictions have the same level of method of establishing permit fees. I respect Mr. Monaco's determination on the square footage. I just feel specifically for Mayfield Heights, because we do have such a large commercial corridor with small square footage buildings, that the valuation would have been the better route to go.
Mr. Mano.
To Mr. Monaco's question, though, how do you address somebody being truthful as to the amount the project is going to cost? Like he said, you can have one contractor doing a bathroom for $20,000 and another one say, I can do it for 10. How do you fall into that fee structure to make it accurate?
So, there's always a possibility of somebody trying to take advantage of the system. I can tell you that any of the recent projects on the Mayfield Road corridor, any of projects on Som Center, these are all commercial projects that require the involvement of a design professional. These are professional individuals, not just a guy in a van coming to do the work. I just don't think, I understand that it sounds like that could be a problem, but I just don't see that being an issue.
Is there a possibility of making a commercial, for a commercial building, one part of the ordinance, and for residential or any other building, the second part?
That's how it's written right now. It's the valuation only applies to commercial projects. The square footage is there for the residential. Again, we just don't have a lot of
mine is not in red.
individual contractors doing commercial work on Mayfield Road.
So
Take
the
it back
fee
to
schedule.
committee?
So we have on the floor to table it and send it back to committee. So I just need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to table.
Mr. Monaco,
Nope.
Mr. DeJohn,
No.
Mr. Mano,
No.
Mr. Balestrea,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
No.
Mrs. Teresi,
No,
Mrs. Snyder.
No, you don't want to table it?
well, I guess not. No one else does.
Okay.
So let's just.
So no. So roll call on the motion to approve.
Approve with changes? Madam President?
Approve what's in front of us.
What's in front?
With his changes?
What's been
What's been
submitted is on
submitted.
the floor.
Would like to have a vote with the amendment that the commercial fees would be based on a square footage rather than a valuation.
I'll second that, that we amend this ordinance.
Okay. So I want to clarify with Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry, you sat down, I feel. So the square footage is for the residential, or for the residentials, the way it's written,
Correct.
and this, and you're going with the evaluation for the businesses. And this is the way it's written,
Commercial work, correct.
commercial. So Mr. Monaco wants to change it and make everything going by square footage. So just so all the members of council understand that.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So what's the amount per square foot? And how does it work out to, like, say, the example that Mr. Thomas gave right now of, a project that's 1.3 million? How do you charge per square foot to get the same, to not lose any money on a permit as you would if it was by evaluation? So what is that written in here, what the determination for the square footage would be?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Mr. Monaco?
I offer to work with Mr. Thomas to help him develop a fee schedule by square footage. You can charge $35 for 100 square feet. You can charge $25 for 100 square feet. Once we determine the fees that he wants to get to, then we can get there by doing it by square footage rather than by percentage of the cost. Another example that I can give you, if we had, the project that we have here in Mayfield Heights, if somebody had applied for a permit, when the project started, the project was 17 million. So the fees would have been based on 17 million. Now we're at 34 million, so the city would have lost probably $17 million worth of fees on this project. So to me, doing it by evaluation, it just doesn't make sense.
Madam Chair, if I could follow up real quick.
Mayor.
So shouldn't that number per square foot be in this legislation? That's why I'm, maybe it's a good idea to go back
To committee.
to committee and figure out what that square footage fee would be. That's, to me,
So-
I think we need it in
But
there.
just to jump in real quick, when, again, creating this fee schedule, I reviewed 17 other municipalities. And in order for us to come up with a fee schedule that's based on square footage, that's gonna get us close to the dollar amount that I have in front of you right now today, it's gonna be an outrageous number that no other community, no other organization does. And typically, you don't want to be the first to try something, but this is a tried and tested method that multiple other communities use. Contractors are familiar with it. They appreciate it because it's easy to come up with the permit fees because it's just 1% of the estimate of the project. It's not that complicated to request written estimates, to request signatures from the owners saying that this is, in fact, the cost of the project. My concern, again, with the square footage is that it's not putting us in the best possible situation. And that's where I was asked to, put these fees together. What I have in front of you right now is a Class A fee schedule.
I know the committee has met 3 times, correct? To go over this, and I remember I was present at the first meeting via,
Also, these
phone.
things, I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, but also, this can certainly be monitored, and if it becomes an issue, we can come back and revise and come up with something different. But I think the fee schedule that's in front of you is is what should be considered and what should be voted on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Monaco.
Mr. Murphy, is that possible to get feedback from my colleagues here to figure out which way they want to go on this? If they want to go by square footage or by value of the project?
Certainly, you can always do that. I think what you've got, like Mr. Thomas was saying, is this is his recommendation to council, and that's what he's, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is what you are requesting be approved by council. If something gets changed, then this ordinance needs to be amended. And I'm not sure how, I know I don't know how to amend it, but that's what would have to happen. So, maybe the thing to do would be to vote on what's before council, and if it's not successful, then go back to the drawing board.
Okay.
Snyder?
Mr. DeJohn, I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
Yeah, are we voting on this with the amendment that Mr. Monaco made, or no?
Because the amendment would need numbers after, and he doesn't know how to
Okay,
create
so
those
we can
numbers.
vote on this.
So it's just the way it sits with the way it was discussed.
And the other question I have for Mr. Thomas, how many other cities are like the one we're going to approve tonight, if we approve it?
That's 17.
I mean, in this surrounding area on the east side of Cleveland, or?
Let's see. I think Brooklyn's about as close as you get. So.
Do you know anything about?
Beechwood has something similar, but yeah. Again, I have an entire PowerPoint presentation lengthily that I could show you. I just,
Okay.
I think that, again, I have no issue with Mr. Monaco's suggestion on the square footage. I just want to make sure that council understands that what's in front of you right now is what I feel is what's best for the landscape of Mayfield Heights, given all the buildings, how they're established. If we try to get to a square footage that's comparable to the valuation numbers, we're just going to be making something up that is really, really up there. So if we want to go with the square footage, it's got to be within reason in regards to what other communities are doing. And that's going to, as far as permits go, that's going to leave thousands of dollars on the table.
Mrs. Snyder?
Mr. Balestria.
Just in light of everything that's just come up all of a sudden, I'm not personally prepared to make a judgment call. I think it should go back to committee and be discussed, and Mr. Monaco can present with some hardcore numbers if he wants to, as far as what the mayor has suggested, do some research as far as what other communities do with regards to square footage, and then come back to council with those numbers. So I would ask that it be sent back to committee.
Madam Chairman.
Mrs. Tressi.
Um,
Sorry.
So maybe we can ask Mr. Thomas, what was the fee that, we'll say Sheets had paid for their fee? They didn't do the valuation because that was a while ago before we discussed.
I think the permit fee for Sheets was right around $1,300, $1,200. As opposed to 16,000.
As opposed to, I'm sorry?
16,000.
16,000. Can we separate and have one fee schedule just for commercial, a totally separate ordinance?
That's what you have right now.
That's what we have.
It is right
It
now.
is, it is separated?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Separated.
I saw residential buildings. So for residential buildings, then we have a valuation also.
No, for residential buildings, I
Isn't that
took
what this
Mr.
is?
Monaco's suggestion and
Oh, you
changed
took
it
it
to
out.
a square footage.
Okay.
we don't have a whole lot of residential building in the city, and it's much easier to come up with a comparable permit fee with the square footage on houses.
Mrs. Sabetta, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I feel that we have a recommendation that's been worked on, and one is for commercial and one's for residential. And now he just said that something that was charged at 1,300 could have been 13,000, 16,000. That would pay possibly for the work that our city does during permits, during inspections.
Yes. Yeah, we would actually be getting close to covering some of our costs on these projects.
Okay.
Well, if this council feels comfortable in voting on it, we can vote on it this evening.
I think you should go back to committee.
So Mike made a motion again to send it back to committee, to table and send it back to committee. So I need a second. Roll call. Roll
Mrs.
call to table.
Mrs.
No,
Sabetta.
roll call to vote.
Roll call to approve? To approve.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
I'm sorry, I'm so confused, I don't even know what I'm voted on here. What,
So we're voting on it the way it was brought to us this evening, the way it was written this evening, yes.
no.
Mr. DeJohn.
Confused.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
No.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes,
5-2?
it's 5-2. Resolution has been adopted. Moving to ordinance number 2022-31, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-31, an ordinance amending Chapter 1341.03 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Fees by revising the fee schedule contained therein and declaring an emergency. Second reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Balestrea. Second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta. Second by Mr. DeJohn. This is just another section of the ordinance where fee changes need to be made. You will see it updated within your ordinance. Is there any comments, or
Yeah.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yeah, I have a question. I've actually had a couple phone calls from some residents, that somehow got a hold of the fee structure already. But the housing license fees, as it's stated, shall be as follows. It went from $20 to $25 for the rental units in the U3 classification. That's an increase of only 25%. But the increase annually for all rental dwellings, other than in all other zoning classifications, that would be residential homes in the city, went up 300%. They want to raise the fee from $50 to $200. And I think that's just exorbitant. That's just my opinion. I mean, there's no equity there as far as being a landlord. I mean, whether you own a rental dwelling structure in a U3's district or a homeowner that happens to own another property. I mean, property owner I talked to has a number of properties in the city, and you're going from $50 to $200 per rental. I know one fella has 40 homes that he rents in Mayfield Heights. I mean, and he keeps them up. I mean, this is not somebody that's a slum landlord. And I just don't think that's an equitable increase. So if you want to comment on that,
So
Braden.
the only comment I would make is you can't really compare the two, because the $20 to $25, you're talking about large multifamily buildings. That number, we will eventually want to get up to around $40, which is about the max that I've been able to find for surrounding communities per unit. But that small $5 increase there, again, is thousands of additional dollars in revenue in regards to the rental license program. And we do have an extensive amount of involvement with these buildings. As far as the single-family dwelling, the only thing I could say in regards to that is, the party's over. It's going to be a little more expensive now. The $50 has got to be some of the lowest rental registration fees I've come across. This $200 mark puts us right in the middle of where the rental housing fees should be. And I've made no secret that it's been my goal from the beginning to address some of these rental issues throughout the city. They do, again, require an extensive amount of involvement. A lot of the times we're dealing with people, in New York or somewhere else out of the state that aren't as eager to cooperate. They eventually do, but they're just not as eager to cooperate. That's a lot of man hours. That's a lot of time that we invest in rental housing through the city. The fee is not to discourage. It's just to get us closer to where we need to be. If there's a compromise in there somewhere, so be it. But this is standard from what I've seen across the surrounding cities.
So there's lots of hands going up. So I'll start with the first one. I saw Mr. Mano down there.
I probably had the same phone call you did, and I told him, that person, you own 40 homes in this city, you've been reaping the benefits for a long time, and it's catching up now. Time to pay the piper. And I think that those fees are fair. I think they're more than fair. I have no problem with raising those fees.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes, that was my first question that I did ask. And the understanding is, as he states, they spend a lot of time, on these buildings. And I asked also why the multi is so small, and he said the same, because you can get the same amount from a two-family, four-family, the same $200 or more as you can from a single family. And I know they may own a lot, but it's the price you pay to do business.
Mrs. Tressi.
So I'm just wondering, Mr. Thomas, if you discussed at all the homeowners or the landowners that own these rental properties, if you discussed those that live out of town. I know we've, in the past, we've had a few homes, one in particular on a side street on the north side of Mayfield that had no running water. And the residents that were living there were taking their shopping cart and going somewhere else, filling up jugs, going back. That property owner lived in California. And again, like you said, difficult to get that person to comply, to respond, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think we should put something in these fee schedules that makes it a little bit more difficult or a little bit less of a challenge for the city to collect funds? Or should we have an escrow fund when you live out of out of the state. I don't know if it's
Legal
been,
question.
is it, I don't know. Is it a legal question?
I'd be
instead of a-
hesitant to deal with, treat landlords differently by where they live.
So I know the property that I'm referring to, I was called by many of the neighbors because there was no water in the house. So,
Recently?
no, it was prior to you arriving. It was a couple years ago, actually. And they were going, the neighbors saw them with shopping carts and jugs, and they were going someplace, filling up these jugs of water and bringing them home. So you think about a health issue, if you can't flush your toilets, take a shower, and I think there was a young person as well as a parent, et cetera, living in this house. At that time, when it was brought to my attention by the neighbors, I was told that the city didn't want to do anything, the building commissioner didn't want to do anything because he would be displacing the people living in there. But it was basically a health issue. And then he had to reach out to California to get a hold of the landowner. So I know maybe you can't discriminate because of the state you live in, but you're saying that we could not have something in an ordinance to help the city?
So I would say that that is not something that I feel at this point. That's not a tool that we need right now. Perhaps it could be investigated further in the future to see, what can be done about that. But as far as rentals go, and regardless of whether they're, down the road or on the other side of the country, my staff is very good at getting in touch with people and getting compliance. So
In a reasonable amount of time?
I would say in a reasonable amount of time in most scenarios. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. DeJohn?
So just thinking out loud and commenting on what Mr. Balestria had to say, I'd like to know how much that person that owns those 40 houses, how much his rent went up in the last couple years, and how much can he sell those houses for now versus what he could sell them for when he bought them? So he probably went up quite a bit, I'm assuming. I don't know, maybe Mrs. Sabetta can tell us about what kind of price increase we've had on houses over the last couple years.
So our goal in the department is to, if we locate rentals, is to get them registered and make sure they stay registered. The problem with that task is the more you find, the more work you create for yourself. I think at this point, we're somewhere around the 600 mark. I know that a couple members of my staff just spent the past 2 weeks getting out rental housing license notices. So again, there is a significant amount of time and effort that's put into the rental program, and I just want to make sure that we're not selling ourselves short in the process.
Do you have other plans for the rental program, or is this just the first step?
This is just the first step, yeah.
Okay. Mrs. Tressi?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. How many, I'm sorry, did you say we have 600 rental properties?
Approximately, yeah.
Approximately 600? Thank you.
That's how many we know.
Madam President.
That's how many we know, yeah.
Mr. DeJohn?
Mr. Thomas, do we have any fine if somebody does not register their house and you discover that?
Yeah, so because this ordinance has not passed yet, we've sent out all the rental notices under the old ordinance. The new ordinance, once it takes place, I believe after February, anything that we discover will fall under this new ordinance. They'll be given a 30-day notice. If they're late, it's an additional $100. So they would be going from $200 to $300 with the late fee. And then the following year, everybody's going to get notices. And as long as they have their fees in by February 2nd, I believe that's the date, it's just the $200. If they're late, it's a $100 late fee on top of that.
Thank you.
Oh, Mrs. Tressi, sorry.
And so it's a $100 late fee. You'll do that after February. What if it takes 6 months for that person to pay that $100 fee plus their rental fee? I mean, what
So-
do we do?
We don't give them that much time. They get a 30-day notice to comply. If there's no compliance within 30 days, then we move them into the court system, which I'll speak on that at a later date. And then once it's in the court system, there's, the fines for some of this stuff is a daily fee as the violation exists, so.
But they can continue to have the renter in that house even though it's in the court system, or
So it's.
they can continue to rent?
So what we can't do is, we can't pull somebody out of a house unless there's, a major health or safety issue. So the ramifications of a situation like that would be a costly bill to the homeowner, which we do a very good job of letting them know. So I think we could speak hypotheticals left and right, but I haven't come across anybody that is not willing to cooperate within a reasonable amount of time.
Good, thank you.
Okay, roll call on the motion to approve. Oh, Mr. Monaco.
Thank you. I would just caution the council about raising the fees that much. If Sheets paid $1,600 last year, 2 years ago, and now we're $16,000, we may price the city right out of the market. That's all I have to say.
We voted on that one already, but
Yeah, I
this
know.
is on, okay. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
No.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, this ordinance has been approved. Ordinance number 2022-32, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-32, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Henderson, Schmidlin and McGarry Company, LPA, to provide legal services from January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2023, and declaring an emergency. Second reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Belstraya,
Second.
second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
No.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta,
Second.
and second by Mr. Belstraya. This ordinance gives this law firm the agreement to provide legal services for the city of Mayfield Heights beginning January 1st through to 2023 through the end of December 31st, 2023. Are there any questions about this ordinance? Okay, roll call on the, oh,
I was going to say,
oh, Mr.
I could probably elaborate. It's been the same contract for the past 8 years, but I'm just elaborate for the record that I have been appointed the Director of Law, and I receive a salary for that. This ordinance would allow my law firm to provide additional services and stay within the four corners of the rules of professional conduct for lawyers, so that we would not run afoul of that. So this is for all hourly work that would be done in addition to the law director's work.
And I'm to the understanding that this ordinance is for, in case you were not present at a meeting, you would send someone from Schmidlin, Henderson, McGarry to perform the legal services for us. Is Is that
Not only if not present at a meeting, but when I first took this job, I was law director in 2 communities, so my time was very valuable, so I had a lot of people from the firm doing additional things. Now, I've retired from Lyndhurst, so my time is more my own, but still I have people from my firm doing work on behalf of the city, and this permits that, legitimizes that, so to speak, at the hourly rate that's contained therein.
It's in section 2, right. Okay, Mrs. Teresi.
There's no agreement attached to the ordinance? Did someone else get an agreement? I did not.
Yeah, I'm not sure, does it say it's attached?
It does not, it just, it's stated in the agreement, but there's no agreement.
Okay, yeah, there's no provision that the agreement's attached.
Oh,
I,
so we just don't see the agreement.
it's been sent over, I can forward it to you in about 5 minutes.
Mrs. Fagan, has it changed from the previous 2 years?
No, it is my understanding it's exactly the same.
Okay.
And it's an annual agreement, it hasn't changed since 2015.
Mr. DeJohn.
So I need clarification. So if we voted no for this, we still have you as law director, but just don't have the law firm?
Yes.
Yes, but the mayor has power to contract for legal services without this agreement, notwithstanding this agreement.
So how does this agreement differ from our agreement with GDP Group? They have, I don't know, how many people in your company working for us? And if we did not agree for the GDP Group, I don't think we could use their services any longer.
I think that the mayor doesn't appoint GPD. We hire that engineering firm. But he appoints the mayor, or he appoints a law director.
It's in the charter.
It's in our charter. So, in order for that to be changed, the charter would need to be changed. So if we don't pass this evening and Mr. Murphy is not at a meeting, then we would not have someone to replace him, because we're not allowing anybody from his law firm to come here and act in his behalf. Is that true?
Correct, except the mayor can hire legal counsel too.
Right, he can hire.
This is more for our Henderson, Schmidlin, and McGarry's bookkeeping, because there's an element of fee splitting, and I don't want to get into the whole thing, but under the rules of professional conduct, I'd rather have an agreement for Henderson, Schmidlin if they're going to be billing the city.
And that billing would be in section 2, an hourly rate, as stated in the agreement that we don't have, but the one that hasn't changed in
Agreement that we don't
59
Yes.
years.
So,
Okay.
Yes.
can we table this and look at it so we can see the agreement?
It's on second reading, so you can just leave it on second reading.
Yeah, we can leave it on second reading so that we can see the agreement.
That's what council wants to do.
Second reading.
Okay. So this will stay on second reading. Thank you. Ordinance number, ooh, Mayor.
Karen, can you make sure that council gets the agreement? Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 2022-33, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-33, an ordinance amending section 559.20 of the codified ordinance of the city titled Outdoor Grills and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn.
Second.
Second by Mr. Belstrat. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn,
Second.
second by Mr. Belstrade. The Legislative Committee met and reviewed a few of our ordinances. This ordinance deals with outdoor cooking appliances, striking out the word grills in Section 559-20, and striking a few of the other words and utilizing words as use of any device and/or appliance, instead of some of the other verbiage. I'm going to reference to Mrs. Sabetta to go over any of this if you'd like to add.
Thank you. No, it is a verbiage change to include newer types of grills, flames that they're using now. So they want to call it appliances.
Smokers.
And is it reference to apartments only, or apartment buildings and balconies? Or is it including houses?
This is mostly apartments and
Okay.
And 15 feet of structure.
fire chief is here to speak if you'd like him to.
Okay.
Or within
15.
15 feet of any structure housing.
He said most, yeah.
So in reality, I mean, this does deal mostly with apartments and balconies. That this was put into place because people were grilling on their balconies, and the smoke was creating issues. A couple of things came up recently where somebody asked me if they could use an electric smoker out there on their balcony. And really, the current ordinance does not really address that because it's not a flame-producing device like a grill would. So I thought it would be a good time, or electric hibachi, you know, those types of things. So we're trying to keep the heat sources away from, you know, balconies and also the smoke and the odors and stuff associated with cooking. So so that that's what the intent of this ordinance is today.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mrs. Tressi?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Chief, are apartments allowed to have live Christmas trees?
No. I believe they all have that in their lease agreements as well. But yeah, any multi-family type thing, trees are not allowed in, or commercial properties.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Sure.
All right, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been approved. Moving to ordinance number 2022-34, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance 2022-34, an ordinance repealing sections 955.01, .02, .06, .07, and .09 of the codified ordinances of the city. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Move.
By Mrs. Tressi, second by Mr. DeJohn. This is an ordinance repealing several sections of the codified ordinance of the city. These are no longer followed, and they should be repealed so they do not confuse the public. Mrs. Sabetta, is there anything you want to add to this one from the meeting?
It's just no longer available or in use. So this is a bit of housekeeping,
Okay,
which you'll notice a lot of the departments are doing now, and boards are also running through their ordinances for changes and repeals. This is one of them.
perfect. Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Monaco?
I have a question for the chief. So this means that if a business operating in the city wants to install a fire alarm system, they can't connect it directly to the fire department. They have to go to a private company, and then the private company will set you the alarm. Is that correct?
Correct.
So are you saturated? You're no longer doing that?
No,
Because I remember one time.
We used to be in that business back prior to 2014, where our dispatch center did monitor commercial and residential alarms, burglar and fire. In 2014, the equipment became outdated. We gave the businesses like 6 months' time to find a third-party alarm monitoring company, and we eventually got all that out of dispatch, including our own community center was affected by that as well. So once we got all that equipment and switched it over, we just no longer offer that service. And this basically just removes some of that language that hasn't been in effect since 2014.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this ordinance has been adopted. Moving to ordinance number 2022-35, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-35, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Trimark for the purchase of kitchen equipment for use at the Mayfield Heights Community Center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second.
second by Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Belstria, second by Mr. Mano. This ordinance pertains to the purchase of the kitchen equipment for the new aquatic center. The total cost is not to exceed $190,363. All members of council should have received the quote, which consisted of 25 pages of items that will be used in the kitchen portion of the new aquatic center. We had a committee of the whole meeting this evening. Mr. Ward touched on this a little bit. Are there any further questions for him? Or, all right, or anyone?
Hope you got everything you need.
Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco.
Wait, hold on, I do want to say one thing. This did come under budget. I'm trying to see the amount here from our meeting. About 37,000 under budget, so, for the record. Well, that's good. Thank you. All right, roll call.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this ordinance has been approved. Ordinance number 2022-36, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-36, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Knight Athletics for the purchase of sporting goods and exercise equipment for use at the Mayfield Heights Community Center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by
Second.
Mr. Balestria. Knight Athletics is a company that we'll be using, if the proposal is accepted this evening, for sporting goods and exercise equipment, which will not exceed the total amount of $100,540. This also was below the budgeted amount from the original. Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Did I miss seeing the exercise equipment that's going to be included? I see the volleyball equipment, but I didn't see any exercise equipment list in here. We have the gym control system and the,
Yeah, that's, that's misleading. So the
Yeah,
senior
it
fitness
is.
equipment will be coming to you later, probably in March of this coming.
I'm sorry.
The senior fitness equipment will be coming in March. So this is just for the basketball hoops, the volleyball standards, the backboards, the rims.
The sporting equipment.
Yes.
So do you think this should be amended to say that? Because it is misleading. It says exercise equipment, and I went through it all and didn't find
Yeah.
any.
So that's the category for the co-op agreement. That's what it falls under, is exercise and fitness
So is the exercise equipment that's going to come in March included in this price?
No. No. This is just the equipment that you see before you. That's just the heading that they use for the cooperative.
Mr. Ward, do you remember how much was budgeted for the exercise equipment?
The senior fitness exercise equipment was, I believe, under 60,000.
Under 60,000.
Yes.
So that's going to be another ordinance that we'll do for 60,000 for that equipment when it comes.
Yes. We're gonna
And
do that.
what will that ordinance say? Authorizing for the same, it's going to say the same exact thing? Sporting equipment and exercise
I
equipment?
don't know. Each cooperative has a different label on how they label that general, the general contract that they have. So this company, that's just their contract. That's how they label it, is in that manner.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's how they labeled it in the contract. It's written right on there. Yeah. Okay. Are there any further questions? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestra.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2022-36 has been adopted. Ordinance number 2022-37. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance 2022-37, an ordinance amending ordinance number 2021-31 for the organization of certain administrative departments and fixing the salaries and bonds for certain officers and employees therein by adding the position of IT manager to Exhibit A, Section 11, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved. Moved by Mrs. Sabetta. Second by Mr. Balestra. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestra.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestra, second by Mr. Monaco. The city has identified a need for an IT manager to manage the various information systems at City Hall. This position was discovered during the 2023, or discussed during the 2023 budget preparation. This ordinance would approve this position for an IT manager to be hired for 2023. The minimum salary is around $67,000 with the maximum salary of $94,000. Mrs. Fagan, is there anything you would like to add? We also have our HR director here, Mrs. Augenstein, if you wanted to come up and talk a little bit about this position.
I actually have really nothing to add. I think you summed that up very well. It was discussed during the budget process and included in the budget request, so it is included in the 2023 budget that was adopted by council.
Mrs. Augustine, could you come up and explain how we do our IT right now? Is there that service data? What's the process?
Sure, we have DataServe as our managed service contractor, and we have a schedule depending on what the issue is on the allotted time for their response. We've found a need as we rely more on technology here at City Hall, and we found that out big time during the pandemic. We were scrambling to get webcams and virtual meeting platforms, and had some issues with those things. So like when we're having meetings, all of a sudden it doesn't work. And while DataServe is wonderful to work with, we need to be able to work through issues right away. And so if we have somebody on site to handle these things, it would just speed up our processes, be more efficient. And we're going to be relying more on technology with the new building. Every year, technology increases here. Reliance on that is surging, and it just really spoke to the need for somebody on site full-time.
Would we then eliminate DataServe?
No, DataServe, so this would be more of a help desk, working through immediate situations, helping employees with adding new computers, printers, email, password lockouts, also projects that are coming up. So all of the technology projects coming up at the Aquatic Center. We have systems here at City Hall, including our phone system that are end of life. Panasonic, which we have for phones, is now out of the telephone business, so we'll be looking to replace the phone system here. So that person would handle all of those projects. DataServe would handle, all of the security of our networks, hosting our systems in the cloud, managing our data center, which we moved to their area, strategic and long-term planning, things like that. And their contract is coming up actually in 2023. So the IT manager, if approved, would work on the RFP for that, and that would be a perfect time to discuss that in the calculations of what we would pay for services, because now we have an on-site person. So it works out with the timing.
Mr. DeJohn, thank you.
And this is a non-union position, correct?
That is correct. I had to think about it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Okay, this is troubleshooting then, during the day?
It is
when you're at
troubleshooting,
work?
yes, and project management.
Okay.
Would they be on call? Like if someone had an issue on their laptop at night or?
Oh, definitely, I'm sure. We need to keep city business operating.
Yeah. Mrs. Tracy?
Mrs. Augustine, is the position being posted now on our website?
No, we don't have it posted because it's not approved, and we don't plan, if it's approved, we plan to fill it in 2023, so we would
And then
wait
you'll
for
post-
approval.
It'll be posted?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
No.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. This ordinance has been approved. Moving to ordinance number 2022-38, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance 2022-38, an ordinance amending the original appropriations, ordinance 2021-36, for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Mayfield Heights, State of Ohio, for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2022, as previously amended by ordinances 2022-11 and ordinance 2022-24, specifically the transfer and supplemental appropriations of funds in various accounts and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved?
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta,
Second.
second by Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Tressi. Everyone should have received this memo of the appropriations that were made in 2022 for the City of Mayfield Heights. This is transferring from general to various funds listed within the amounts in their appropriations. These sums are appropriated and summarized as seen in Section 2, Exhibit A, transferring from general to various funds listed with their amounts next to them. Does any member have any comments, or Mrs. Tressi?
I just want to comment on the budget forms that you sent out, the Muni. Those reports are just amazing. That was,
Thank you. I think they are much easier to read,
Much easier.
much more decipherable. So,
yes,
thank you.
it was really pleasant running through them. I think I sent you an email saying what a great job, but I just wondered if you could paginate the departments. I know it just scrolls is probably easier than, but I didn't know if that was a function of that.
Actually, it's left over from the days of printing hard copies where I was trying to save paper and not cutting down a tree, so you just put it as close
Yeah,
together
I
as you
get it.
can. We will, not necessarily by department, but by fund, by org,
By
which
fund,
is
yes.
department.
Right.
But some departments have areas in different funds, so, but yes, we can certainly do that.
It was great, really.
Perfect. Any further questions? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria? Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, this motion has been, or this ordinance has been approved. We have no motions this evening, and new business from council. I just want to wish everyone happy holidays. Stay healthy and enjoy. Are there any comments from council?
I just have a question for Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, if we wanted to make a charter change, someone on this council wants to make a charter change, how would he go about doing that? I know the council would have to approve that, and then we would have to get 10% of the last voting, petition the last 10% of the voting population. Is that correct?
I don't think, if council initiates the change, I think council can do that by ordinance saying we want to make this change to
The charter?
and submit it to a vote of the electorate.
So it's one or the other, not both, correct?
I think it's just council. When council initiates the change, I think you don't have to go back and get a certain percentage of the voters to approve putting it on the ballot for the rest of the voters to vote for.
And if council does not approve it, then you can go out and get 10% of the last voting.
Right,
to
you
get
can
it on the
always
ballot.
do that as a percentage
how-
of the citizens. I'm not sure about the 10%. If you've looked at that, then there is some percentage in order to make a charter change that you'd have to come up with in order to get it on the ballot.
And how is that, then how is that done? Do you go directly to the Board of Elections? Is that how that's done?
You would adopt, and we did that 5 years ago, maybe. There were some changes to the charter, but you would have it by ordinance, and then you would come up with the charter language, and then council would adopt it and authorize. There's a couple of bells and whistles that you have to comply with, but
We have a charter?
basically you approve it and you send it down to the Board of Elections to put it on the ballot at the next general election.
Normally, we would formulate a via council, a charter review committee, and that also can consist of residents. That's
You
how
can
we've
do
done
that,
it-
too.
That's how we've done it in the past.
Yeah.
It's just, because I've been part of that, so.
Yeah, that, and I
Yeah.
can say that hasn't been done, Charter Review Committee, since I've been here, so that's 2014.
Can you do a referendum also?
A referendum is,
Then,
no, a
as a
referendum
charter
is
change?
the people trying to change an ordinance or a resolution that's been
Oh, but not the
adopted
charter.
by council.
But not the charter.
But no, it has nothing to do with the charter. It's just, if you adopted an ordinance and then the people would have 30 days to go out and get enough signatures to have that ordinance repealed by referendum. And then that goes on the ballot, too.
Any further comments? New business?
The last charter review was done during either Egansburg or Costabile. 97.
Okay.
I was around.
Yeah, Mayor Regensburg.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mrs. Tressi. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We are now adjourned.